Good evening, everyone. Here we have yet another great podcast as part of BBFC versus MPAA. We'll also be doing this for Secrets of the BBFC as well, courtesy of our friend Tom here, who hasn't really done a podcast in a while, but we're glad to have him back, as well as our usual Rob Bavister or Bobatron, and then
Hey,
me,
hey.
Skinny Ebert. How do you do, everyone?
Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, um, just for starters,
This podcast is sponsored by the meerkats at compared to supermarket. Well, not really.
because we're talking about the 40th anniversary of the PG 15 and 18 certificates.
And the R18, if you think about it.
Oh yes, of course, there. But that might be for another podcast there, because that's pretty much pornography. But to each his own, I suppose. And also UC as well. That used to be a rating back in the day for films and TV shows are strictly for preschool children.
Oh yeah. Oh, UC. Yeah, that is true. But I remember a few of my old videos having that. That went by the wayside. But I suppose when you consider that the U rating is pretty much defunct anyway, because most kids' films get rated PG. Anything that has got a U is going to be as benign and saccharine as possible. What the hell could a UC mean nowadays?
Probably like something like Barney or The Hoops or Teletubbies, one could argue. I
That'd
kind of,
still just be you, considering what PG was Frozen.
oh yes, you're right there. Changing attitudes. What would have been once very family friendly and suitable is now not viewed as family friendly. I still view PG as a bit of a dangerous rating, anyways. Maybe that's
To me,
just
it's
me.
lost. To me, it's lost any edge it ever had. I mean, when you start seeing not just Frozen, but Kung Fu Panda and oh, I can't remember the other ones from the mid to late 2000s that started getting rated PG when after 12 became 12A. So, well, I've been down. Well, I'm not
Well,
going to go off again.
there is a movie that comes to mind, Cars, the Pixar movie, the first one, that was PG, but the only thing I can think of that really got it to earn that rating was maybe some car crashing. It was comedic, and then loud noises of cars revving up. Because even the revving kind of startled me because I don't like loud noises too much, but that could have easily have been a U. I think they gave it because I heard something about they thought the word piston was a euphemism for piss,
I've
which
not
is
seen them.
mild
Well,
swearing.
I've not seen Cars 2 or Cars for that matter, so I really cannot comment one way or the other on that. I'm just going to have to pass on that one.
Well,
Have you
no
seen it,
need.
Tom?
No, I haven't seen either of them. I guess that stuff never really interested me that much. I was never really interested in like cars or planes, which was the Cars like spin off or something. I did see Wally though, which was actually just released on 4K in the US again, but this time I think they added like Dolby Vision to it or something. Yeah, that's a pretty classic film, I guess, even though it's like 14 years old, I think.
Uh,
Yep, I remember
Possibly.
seeing it at Cineworld at Milton Keynes. Review certificate. It was G rated, which made me very happy. Even if there is a brief little bit where the robot puts a bra on his eyes, not knowing what it is. Um,
I
Look
really
how
don't
far
think
we
that.
come.
I don't think that counts for much, to be honest. You gotta look that other way when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Uh, so I mean, I suppose it. I mean, you should be talking this as you think you're hosting this, Mark. But obviously, because if we're going to talk about the transition 40 years ago from the A, AA, and X to the PG 15 and 18, I suppose the biggest elephant in the room we have to admit is that AA originally meant 14. So it's kind of a jarring and weird that, not massively jarring and weird, that they decided to change it to a 15 rather than a 14 certificate. Why they decision to bump it up a year?
Yeah, I always thought that was a little peculiar in of itself. I think part of it has to do with well, Actually, I don't really know why. Maybe they try to do like a sort of free age gap thing. Is probably what they had in mind. Hence the explanation for why 12, 15, and 18 are everyone's divided by every 3 years. I don't know exactly the entire reasoning behind
It
it, but I
was
know it has something to do in part with, weirdly enough, Poltergeist, which they gave an X before the transition to the new rating system occurred, which they put into place simply because of videos. It was easier to sort of put in the standards age ratings for videos, as that was becoming a thing in the early 80s. And then they gave Poltergeist a 15 instead of an X, and by bumping it up a year later, I meant, they felt a bit more confident.
well, possibly. Like I say, I don't know, but I don't know about the whole 12 thing because that was released 7 years after the change. I was always thinking if they had kept well, it has a 14 rating or a 15 rating, would that have meant in 1989 when they wanted to rate Batman, instead of creating a 12, they would instead created a 10 rating for like to keep a 4 year gap going? Because that'd be weird.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't get behind something like that. I'm used to it being, every 3 years you can watch a dangerous little movie, and in the next 3 years another dangerous movie. I don't know. It was
Yeah.
the methodology behind why they bumped up AA by a year, and it was, excuse me, sorry, I had a curry, by a year. But with going to context about everything that was going on, the rating system was ultimately changed around, I believe, the 2nd of November. Weirdly enough, around the same time that Channel 4 launched, which ultimately became one of the most controversial TV stations on British history, home of
I think
the.
it's probably more of a coincidence.
Yeah. Well, at least it's not ITV.
Well, yeah, I mean that has been pretty bland. It was always well renowned if a film was aired on ITV or HTV as we knew it, even if it was on after Watershed, it would just be edited to absolute buggery.
I don't
I
have much
think
faith on ITV programs. They also sort of do ad breaks abruptly.
Well, that was always annoying. It's just that I remember the first time I saw Die Hard was, of course, the HTV version, and of course that was the Yippee Ki Yay Kimasabi version. So of course that, and I remember several years later I watched the original, actually proper version of Die Hard on video. Of course, it was completely uncut. It was like just watching a totally different movie.
yeah.
I kind of feel sorry for you because, in the UK, we don't have the kind of bizarre censorship standards that you have in the States, where you can't really show strong language or full frontal nudity even after 9 o'clock. You have to air an edited version, which is the version they usually submit when you're flying on a plane from like London Heathrow to LAX or something. Treat the audience as if they're adults, really. If it's intended for that audience, there's a certain time of the night, then you don't need to censor it.
Well, yeah, I mean, enough's been said about that version of RoboCop, the freaking Airhead version, which is cut so ridiculously heavily it may as well have been PG rated.
Your client's a crumbag, and crumbag see the judge on Monday morning.
Yeah, and what? Once we already said the whole Airhead bit, but yeah, that's I'm trying to think what else they said, but I can't remember. Forget Jones. I go straight to old man. I'm good. But okay, so we're not here. We're getting a little off topic with the censoring of TV broadcasts. So we're here to talk about the the being the 40th anniversary of modern age ratings, I guess.
Pretty much there. With you being the longest rating that has been in existence since 1912, you have essentially, I believe, like 70 years later, PG 15 and 18, which would have much of a marked name for itself within the history of British film classification. so many films were given PGs that were quite commercial. There was sort of, eventually PG back then was like our 12A nowadays, and 15 was kind of one could argue a mix between 12A and sort of lower level 15s, and your 18s back then are like your today's 15s. And the films that would have been like the hard 18s, like your Human Centipedes and Serbian films, they would have been cut or banned back in the
They would
good
be
old
on that
days.
video nasty. Well, they would be on that video nasties thing from the 80s. And of course, I think we could all bring it that the transition, of course, happened under the reign of he who should not be named.
Indeed. I can do James Furman's voice, It's always been like this. It's just a matter of fact.
Yeah,
I
I
think
would say. Pardon?
I think the worst voice was John Trevelyan's voice. Like, he had a particularly condescending tone when he was speaking. He was like, "We have no rules, which I think is important. I think it is the only way to do it." Yeah, if you didn't have your fucking guidelines, then yeah, consistency would be out of the window. So
Oh
thank God
yeah,
for that,
that's a
mate.
good. Oh yeah, I saw that interview because it was on the cutting edge version of episode for Point Break, wasn't it? What a dick. I mean, I'll say to that guy, he did say he wanted to, well, first of all, increase X to 18, which happened after he'd quit, but also make it, well, uncensored, save for when it legally had to be, much like what the American MPAA was doing with its X rating. Yeah, he couldn't get that done, and that didn't happen until, well, never happened under the reign of the X rating. Didn't even really happen until 18, until at least after the turn of a millennium.
No, you're
Yeah,
absolutely right, because they start allowing a bit more films to pass through because now there are a set of guidelines, there's a new Labour government, and there's a change of people who were in charge. Lord Harlech and Robin Duvall, that lot.
Yeah.
Andreas
Whittam
Whittam
Smith.
Smith. Yep, snap.
Jinx.
I don't think I might have caught some of those don't think I might have known any of those names. All I do know is that you hear a lot of people who were there during the arse end of Furman's reign, and of course, if Furman was a liberalising force at the beginning of his reign, he sure as hell wasn't towards the end. He was clearly much more conservative than the rest of the board were. And as I mentioned this on our my podcast with Tom about James Furman's Secrets of BBFC, is like, as soon as he fucked off, the rest of them were just like, that guy. And it's like, right, what dickish policies did he have so we can get rid of? It's like, nunchucks? Yeah, we're getting rid of that rule. Well, Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Oh yeah, they're fine. It's like, I mean, as a guy who was like already quite I would have been about 14 when Furman buggered off, and just remember my later teenage years, there was a sense of liberation where all these films that are previously banned or heavily cut were just suddenly coming into circulation. It's like, oh, this is cool. So it's amazing how things have changed in my lifetime.
No, even myself as well, on a censorship level. But even though I'm younger than you, there were films that I really wanted to have seen back then that unfortunately I didn't know until much later that they were tampered with or censored a little bit, or the 18 kind of has lost its power and now has become 15. It's a little bizarre. So I remember when Lock, Stock and Snatch came out, wanted to see those, couldn't because I wasn't 18 back in 2000 and
Nor was I.
1998. But upon knowing that Snatch eventually got re-released and was re-rated 15, kind of made me feel a little upset. Like, oh, now the whole danger of it all has kind of been lost.
Well, yeah, but if it could be re-rated 15, then the 18, as far as I'm concerned, was never warranted in the first place. And so, I mean, essentially, you could say you were lied to by its 18 rating. The more they let go let pass through at 15, the more it makes you think when something does get rated 18.
No, you're right. I mean, even I feel that way too. But sometimes there's certain things that can overlap or kind of be like, oh, I was expecting a little bit more. I will say that about Barbarian and Last Night in Soho. Those were 18 films. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I thought, I was expecting something to be really horrific, but all I got was a stabbing or someone's face being smashed on a wall. I don't know.
I
Yeah,
think
that
sometimes people. Oh, I think sometimes people can have like this expectation of what an 18 rated film would be, so they would immediately expect the worst. But like 18 rated films don't have to have the worst content possible. Like it can literally just be things that are slightly too much for
Yeah, is it
15
like a
anyway.
technicality? Really, I know there was an Irish little ditty called Garage. They given that film an 18, and they lost the appeal to get the 15 because it depicted a VHS cover that had explicit sexual content, like looked like a woman was probably sucking someone off, and it was a very brief shot, but it was still too explicit to pass at 15, even though it was just a
yeah.
I
side of
guess
a VHS cover.
Well, yeah, but you're surprised that if it's just something little minimal like that, usually most distributors will just think, okay, we'll just edit that out for the theatrical release and get it passed with a 15 rating. That's what we did with the first Hangover movie. There's one shot where there's a bit of oral sex being passed, which the BBFC thought, well, that has to be 18, so they blurred it out, and then it was fine at 15. I mean, I thought they only surrender a rating if they just physically can't cut around it because it would render the film unwatchable, or but it's just the quote unquote tone of the film, which makes any form of cuts, well, just doesn't work.
Well, that's
I
what
think.
happened with Cloverfield and also banned movies like Human Centipede 2 in its full version and Grotesque. There was no way around and trying to get any cuts because it would have affected the entire execution of what the film was, and therefore they, in case of Cloverfield, they had to stick with the 15, even though on a visual level it's probably not that graphic for most 12A disaster films. But that's
I don't
that's
think it
their
is either.
testimony, not mine.
Well, they said that about first Terminator film back in, was it 1984 or something, that they just felt that the film was, it had to be an 18, and the film was so tightly edited and everything, they actually couldn't cut around it to get it down to a 15. But to be honest, obviously the Terminator's 15 now, but it's like, yeah, it should have been 15 from the get-go. The film, when you look at it, is actually quite tame. And I mean, not like massively tame, but it's hardly the same level as RoboCop.
Yeah, there's a definite discrepancy involved. You can even see that about Judgment Day. When you compare that to all the 15 movies eventually come after, it looks awfully mild. It looks kind of 12A-ish to me. I saw Terminator 2 Judgment
And
Day a few
considering
years
it had to
ago.
be cut for it, it had to be cut for its 15 as well.
I can
Yeah,
I
that's
can
bizarre.
I can half understand the cuts for Terminator 2 because it is quite a bit more graphic than the first film. Like the first film was probably fine at 15 in 1984, but Judgment Day did have a couple of moments that did seem a bit like out of place for 15 at the time, particularly like that scene where Sarah beats a guy over the head with a bat or something.
Yeah, I know what you're referring to. Is after she breaks out of the her confinement. I mean, I suppose you're right. I mean, when we talk about the quote unquote tone of a film, it's definitely got a more action movie feel to it, which certainly makes it a lot more easy going. Obviously, both films are now passed through completely uncut at 15.
Yeah.
Whether or not you say it's 12A material, like what Mark said, I don't. Well, there's too many f bombs in there for a 12A now, anyway. Obviously, it's certainly stronger than Terminator 3 was, because we mentioned this in our first our first podcast, well, us three did together, we talked about Terminator 3, and of course, it's 12 over here. It's R rated in America. There's there's a bit of dispute to who got it right. So it's like, well, there's that hand ramming scene, but I know it's quite well lit, but it's quite quick. It doesn't linger on it too much. And that is the only really bit of strong violence you can see in the film. And of course, the word fuck is only mentioned 3 times in it, which personally is why I think the MPA slapped it with an R anyway, because you know what they're like. Um, so,
Yeah.
in comparison to the first two Terminator films, it is a lot milder.
I haven't seen Rise of the Machines. But
You're not
I
missing
would
much shit.
presume that's probably the case. That actually, weird enough, I was told by my father I could not see Terminator 3 at the cinema, even though I was watching quite a lot of 12As at the time when it came out. But I was told I couldn't see it because, you know, he remembered the other Terminator movies and they were 18 and 15, so he kind of told me you can't go see it. At the time, it was a little strange, but then again, months later, I would watch The Matrix, and that was one of the first 15 films I ever saw, which I kind of guess is a good place to start. Aside from Beetlejuice, it's pretty mild for 15 compared to what
Yeah,
you
it is
get
quite. It is quite. I
nowadays.
was surprised. I'm
Yeah.
quite surprised that got rated R in the MPA by the MPA as well. And the only reason I can think is because when he's shooting up those security guards, because they're wearing white shirts, the blood squibs actually show up a bit more. So it's like I'm guessing that must be why it was rated R. I mean, I'm kind of glad it was because it's rated 15 over here, and if I hear a 15 rated movie, it's PG-13 stateside. Oh, it does make me a little bit angry.
Well, some
But
films deserve it. Like, most of your horror films, Jason, to get that certification. And The
No, I'm
Woman
angry at the
King.
BB. Well, no, I'm angry at the BBFC for being too zealous. That's what I meant.
Okay. Yeah, I get you.
Because they're kind of representing our country and everything, and of course when they give a higher rating than Americans or other countries do, I can't help but think it reflects badly upon us Brits.
Well, I kind of thrive upon
A
it.
bit
Maybe that's just a
nationalistic.
bit weird for me because it makes us look like we're a bit tough. We've always been sort of the Puritans of Europe for that reason, because a lot of the films that probably were 18 or 15 sometimes can be suitable for all ages in France, or get as low as like a 12 in
Oh, that
Germany.
weird.
And
Yeah.
don't even forget about our Australian and Canadian Commonwealth brothers. Most of the rated films that are rated usually will be like MA, where you can bring under 15s with you, or 14A. Under 14s can go see it as long as they're with a parent. That can even, some 18 films get 14As in Canada, so.
That's fair. Yeah, I have noticed difference between. I mean, that film Bore that came out a few years ago had Nathan Jones in. They said it was the first film of that director that got away with an Australian M15 plus rating. Still got rated 18 over here, so that tells me everything I need to know.
the
Well,
first Saw
was it for
film was
like
rated.
swearing or sex?
Pardon? Sorry, sorry, Tom. What'd you say?
Well, I think the first Saw film was rated MA15 plus. Like how
That's
that
a bit.
got an MA15 plus
Yeah,
is kind of
I won't ever get. I don't
strange.
understand that. I especially maybe the theatrical R-rated version. Even though no, I don't really think so. Definitely not the uncut version, which was going to be NC-17 rated, because yeah, that's just ridiculous. I mean, I find it surprising. I mean, I know they saw films all had to be cut to avoid NC-17s, but it's like, yeah, but you let all that go at R. How fucking violent does a movie have to get for it gets rated NC-17? I mean, considering what stuff you'll rate NC-17 just for language or sex. Bit of rant there, I know, but
No,
It's just
but you have a good point there. I often wonder sometimes too, because sometimes, well, this sometimes affects indie films a lot more than mainstream titles. Every now and again, you'll start seeing a rated R film that's pretty graphic as far as violence and gore is concerned. But then you see a film that was threatened with the NC-17, was the sort of unrated version that they would ultimately release, and then you think to yourself, wait, I've seen something just similar to that in a rated R film. What gives? But then again, it's sort of like a rotating table of raters, and they vote by public vote. It's never consistent at the Motion Picture Association. That's why I don't like it.
well, I suppose you're. Well, I mean, we could talk about the MPAA until the cows come home. That's not really what we're here to discuss. I mean, they have their problems. I guess the BBFC's always had theirs. I mean, I think we got a little off topic, really, considering what the original subject was, because we discussed the issue of the AA being increased to 15 for. I think they gave a reason for it, but for love of me, I can't remember what the hell it was, and frankly, I don't give a shit. I mean, I do, but I mean, I just think it's talking bollocks. There's also the fact there's also a fact that the A rating had some restrictions somewhat on them. I can't remember what it was. I think under fives had to be accompanied to the cinema and everything. But like, who the hell goes to the cinema when they're under five by themselves? Something like that. But of course,
Actually, I
but
did hear something about under 14s will require parental guidance or supervision for an A certificate film. They probably were thinking that A probably would be a euphemism for accompaniment
well,
before it would be co-opted as 12A years
well,
later.
very possibly. But of course, it got replaced PG, and of course, PG was completely de-restricted just to parental guidance, which I think was a pretty cool move on the BBFC. I do wonder if that's why so many films prior to the change got away with U ratings, which are boggle the mind nowadays. Obviously, Watership Down. We've talked about that to a cows come home. The first two Star Wars films, albeit Return of the Jedi was after the change, and E.T. as well. You know, where the kid yells penis breath at the top of his lungs, and has the word shit and douchebag are mentioned at various points. You know, I mean, these were before the change. It's like, how the hell could you get away with this at a U? Is it just because the A had some restrictions on, so you thought that'd be too strong a rating?
And where was Mary Whitehouse during that period? Where the fuck was she during Watership Down? While she was banging on about fucking Evil Dead or whatever, which while she was banging on about that, meanwhile you had Watership Down. Yeah, how many kids had nightmares from that?
I know, and she's considering her motto, or basically her story was she was looking to defend the children. It's like, shouldn't you focus more on films that are rated appropriate for kids and films that are rated appropriate for adults? Yeah, but of course, she don't give a shit about that, really. She just wanted to tell people what they could and couldn't watch because she was a religious Puritan and she'd go fuck herself, frankly.
The funniest thing was that everyone was going on about, oh, you need to edit this for some kid to pass by the TV and just say, oh, and just look at it and be disturbed by it. They could do that anyway. You could do that with literally any film. There isn't much point in trying to censor everything down to a child-friendly rating just so some toddler can pass it and not be disturbed by it. If they don't want to watch it, if they're going to see it, that's on the parents.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned yourself in our podcast in Jay's Phone. You said it was Karol Topolsky, I believe, who was talking to Furman about his decision to refuse The Exorcist a rating, saying, "Look, we're not the parents. We can't make decisions." And it's like, fucking thankfully, someone gets it. Like, parental responsibility. I mean, get your bloody nannying hands off our movies. If you want to cut something for commercial reasons because you want a certain rating and you couldn't get it in uncut form, yeah, it's annoying, but I'm okay with that. I can get behind that. I totally understand why you do that, as provided we get the uncut version on DVD or on streaming. But you know, don't fucking mandate cuts just because you're a bunch of busy bodies. I'm going to go on a rant again. Yeah.
Well, in the good words of Boris Johnson, he would probably say, "You Jennies."
Well, he'd say something. I don't think we'd catch what it is. We got 9 minutes left, by the way.
Oh yes, but don't worry, I'll be more than happy to edit a few things around here and there. It's just for some reason the Skype I'm using is a bit of a buggedy bear when you're at the house. But when you're at other places or out and about and you're like Costa, it usually works just fine. But getting back to everything, maybe it comes down to the whole root of the question. Your experiences with PG, 15 and 18. I would like to hear from Tom first because he is the youngest one in this panel. Your experiences with those ratings growing up.
Yeah. If I'm honest, I haven't really had that. I only really had proper experience with 15 films. A couple of years ago, I think one of the first 15 rated films I saw at home was Terminator 2, and I really enjoyed it. But I can't say I was watching much of those at the time. I think the first 15 film I saw at the cinema was 1917. And yeah, again, that was like a great experience. Um,
I actually managed to see
in
it before the pandemic closures, so I'm very proud of
Oh, good effort.
I didn't see
I've,
I didn't see Zion's to the cinema. Anyway, that's not this. Also, what about your first 18 rated film, Tom?
I think the first 18 I've seen like in full is Fernando Bertolucci's The Dreamers, which
Not seen
ironically
that?
was also NC-17 in the US. But
Oh, full on.
it's a really tame film. Like it's quite a gentle film altogether. It's not like it's not like I mean like I've seen films that are like 15 rated that are perhaps like more impactful than The Dreamers. It's like
How? Sorry, how old is that film?
it was released in 2003.
Okay, well, that's a fair bit of time to go. Guess times have changed because I've seen a few films that have been rated NC-17. I'm thinking, I mean, there's a bunch of R and 15 rate films that might have had more impact, but those films are date back to the 90s. And contrary to what a lot of older millennials like myself may say about how great the 90s were, they were probably a more conservative time, and people weren't quite as not quite as liberal. But sorry, I think I interrupted you there a little bit.
That's fine, don't worry. Yeah, I sort of like I guess like before I turned 18, I had this kind of I would play like this endless guessing game in my mind if I like saw something that was on the border between 15 and 18, I'd be like, would it be 15? Would it be 18? I would play it over and over in my mind for some weird reason. And then I got to 18, I was like, oh, yeah. So you can just like see anything now. Oh, great. It's funny how like the system can have such a big like imprint on your mind in terms of like what you watch and how you react to it. But yeah,
It's
I guess
funny
that's just
because
Well, he made a very good point there because I am older than Tom, but I'm younger than Rob here. And when I was growing up, I thought 18 was this sort of milestone that I was a little bit scared of trying to accomplish because I thought these movies were so going to be so dangerous and corrupt my memory. And all I assumed was that all these types of films that had the red circle were movies that my father loved. So I didn't really see my mother watch a lot of 18 certificate films, except for probably like Fight Club or every now and again. And I couldn't watch them, at least back in the day. But I was always curious to know what was the thing that made it. I always assumed that if you shown people getting killed by chainsaws, or if you shown like someone's prick, it would get an 18. I was that naive. Because I've even seen 12 and 15 works that show chainsaw violence and pricks.
a 12 rate film that showed chainsaw violence. Which film have you? What film's that?
Well, Happy Tree Friends. I
Oh,
can
that's
include
a
TV and
oh,
stuff.
oh, it's a fuck. That's an animated one.
what's a
I
fucking
was,
cartoon, dude? Come on,
oh, come
it's a
on!
silly
Like
cartoon, dude.
it's not exactly like a chain. It's not exactly like I think there's
Like
a TV
Itchy and
series Bottom.
Scratchy, Simpsons. That had quite a bit of wild stuff in there. But I was naive like that.
Again, very comical, mate. I
Bless.
mean, it's
I
not really
was
gruesome.
like 8 when I thought these crazy things. And then I saw, years later, because I started watching 15 films around 2006, and you had stuff, later on, I would watch like Hot Fuzz. And I saw that perhaps as I was 14. And
Oh,
that
that
scene with
tracks.
the graphic man having his head exploded by a church spire, I thought, oh, that was
Very,
rich. And then
very
Elfin Lee,
comical though.
that was a really extreme experience. And I thought, I didn't know 15 films could push it that far.
Well, I mean, the BBFC have historically been quite light on animation, although that's changed a lot recently. Because we've mentioned Akira so many times, and Princess Mononoke, and of course we just mentioned earlier Watership Down. Although, again, that was under Furman's Furman's tenure, and less said about him, the better. Although we kind of have to talk about him because I mean he was for the longest tenure at the BBFC, and it was him who changed who created the modern ratings. But yeah. I mean, what was the
thank
first
him
film?
for some things.
Yeah, I don't thank him for much though. I mean,
No, me neither.
he created the 12 rating. He probably should have made it 12A at the beginning and everything. I mentioned to Mark on one of our podcasts back 2 months ago to celebrate 12A's 20th anniversary. You know, my brother was 11 when Batman came out, and he didn't look any older than 11. He didn't probably about 8. He couldn't see Batman, was very upset about it. And of course, fast forward 13 years later, him and his 2 younger brothers are both well exceeded the age of 12, and then they decided to restrict for 12 rating. It's like, yeah, well, you should have done that a bit sooner, really, shouldn't you, dicks?
Well, I guess they're trying to be different from the Americans because the PG-13, which came out in 1984, ultimately was unrestricted, with the caveat that parents are strongly cautioned. I always, growing up in England, and this is a bit weird because I'm also partially American, I always assumed that PG-13 meant that you had to be at least 13 to go see it.
Well,
I think I didn't have that problem because a lot of PG-13 films are 12As in the UK. And I had this weird feeling that had I saw Small Soldiers and Men in Black and Edward Scissorhands, films that I loved so much when I was a child, back in the States, I probably would not have been able to see them until much later in my life. And that kind of haunted me. That kind of gave me nightmares. Because I love those movies so much, and if I was told I couldn't watch them at like 6 and 7 when I first saw them, that would have pissed me off.
Well, yeah. Well, that's why so many films were rated PG in the 90s, because the 12 was restricted. I mean, you say we want to be different for Americans, but I've come to the regretful conclusion that our age rating does have to sort of match what the Americans do, because that's where the movies come from, and they're made to fit into those ratings.
No, you're exactly right there. Well, it's mainly a money's game, a numbers game, anyways. I think that whole one size fits all thing doesn't always work for me because sometimes there's a little bit of leeway here and there, as we have seen with outliers in recent years, like Paw Patrol the movie, which is G-rated, or Blonde, which is NC-17. But that's kind of getting off topic on my end because it's not really specifically about PG 15 and 18. But I will say, because I've talked a little bit about the 15 certificate on my personal experience, and 18. The first 18 film I saw in the cinema was Watchmen. I was not legally speaking 18.
Most people weren't when they saw the first one, to be honest.
I won't go into explicit details, but I did not have a very good experience with Watchmen, particularly because there were some adverts for road safety and safe sex that were quite disturbing in the beginning. And then there's that attempted rape scene and the scene with a man having his arms being chainsawed in the prison.
That was brutal.
Was disturbing and violent. But I love the movie, even if people have an issue with Zack Snyder. But I love it. But yeah, that movie did not sit well with me when I first saw it, in the same way that Splice, Elf and Lead, which are 15s, didn't sit well with me. And then I would eventually, legally speaking, when I saw the first 18s, when I was 18, I think it was probably like Drive, that Ryan Gosling movie. And watching a man's head being smashed in on the elevator certainly made my day. And then 15 films, I think when I did turn 15, it was probably something like Disturbia, which I do like that movie. I know people don't like Shia LaBeouf, but I did. It's actually PG-13, but it was originally R-rated, but they gave it an appeal because of the terror. And then with PG films, well, it's Toy Story, really. I know it's a bit of a weird one because it's G-rated, at least the first one is, but that's a movie I hold dear into my heart. I can't watch it again because I start crying, but they got PG because of dangerous behavior involving fireworks and matches involving a tween.
Yeah, there's always been a bugbear with theirs, and I think that was Well, obviously back then it's unusual for a G-rated film to get rated PG and everything, because at the lower end back then, the BBFC were more lenient than the MPAA, just more stricter at the stricter at the higher ends. Um, so yeah, that was a bit unusual.
Because I will add this. I'm sorry to interrupt you there. Because most of the films that
Sorry.
were PG that were animated in the 90s were usually sort of more adult oriented or a little bit off the cuff, like Nightmare Before Christmas and Ants. They're a bit
That's true.
more strong, and then Roger Rabbit, that was late 80s. Those movies were a bit more adult oriented, Simpsons included. So if an animated film or TV show was PG back in the 90s, be a bit alarmed. But now, any bloody thing can be PG.
Again, Frozen. You kind of spoken that enough times. Enough said.
Exactly there. I'm sorry to have kind of got you off in a tangent, but that's just my
That's all
experience.
right.
I
We're having
know
a chat.
for you, your experiences with PG and 15 and 18, because we know about you saw South Park underage, you saw Jurassic Park,
Yeah.
that was your first PG, and then you saw.
No. The first PG I saw was Memoirs of an Invisible Man, to the best of my knowledge. Jurassic
Is
Park.
that
was
the
first...
John Carpenter movie?
No, I don't think it's John Carpenter. It's got Chevy Chase and Sam Neill in it.
Yeah, it had to be cut for a 12 rating over here. Sorry, it had to be cut for a PG over here.
Yeah, cuts were minimal. They just cut out a singular F-bomb. Everything else was fine, apparently.
Okay. And then your 18 film was 28 Days Later.
Correct. You got good memory.
Yeah, well, I know you like a tinderbox. I just don't know too much about your employment and how much money you make for sex life. We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, we'll keep that under wraps for the time being. Yeah, it was the first. Yeah, I don't think Tom wants to know that shit anyway.
To be honest, I couldn't give a less a fuck. So just kick me out, discuss it all you want, or just leave me on mute or whatever.
But yeah, my first PG was Memoirs of Invisible Man. My dad took me to see it when I was 7. I don't remember all the risque material in it, because I remember I saw it one time a few years back later on TV, and I was like, there's all the constant droppings of the S of shit, and the scene where Sam Neill's character threatens to castrate another character, literally saying, "I will cut one of your testicles off." And it's quite surprised, like, damn, did this all get through at PG? This is what I saw at age 7 at the cinema? But yeah, first
you're
50.
badass.
Well, don't want to blow my own horn. And yeah, like you say, first 15 was South Park, and what a 15. And of course, yeah, like you say, the first 18 was 28 Days Later. Just like with my first 12, my first 15, and my first 18, I all saw when I was 1 year underage. So make of that what you will. Well, I think I've exhausted.
We won't call the police on you. And you better not do the same for me with the Watchmen issue, because I saw that underage.
I'm certain the police would really give 2 flying fucks that you saw a movie in your underage 13 years ago.
But it does pain me sometimes, and I'm sure this has been made evident with you sometimes, that I do look at envy with those who are older than me, because they got to see more interesting stuff than I did. Because when I started watching a lot more the 18s of this in the cinema, around that time, they started transferring to digital. There was less 35mm prints, and the sort of shock value of it all. And also because we started having more broadband at home, so I could start to watch more stuff at the house if I wanted to on the internet. It just felt like, the danger has kind of been erased a little bit. And, the internet, that's a topic we could go on about, particularly because now that has made things that would have been taboo more permissive, or vice versa. We kind of go either way.
Well, that is true and everything. I mentioned earlier the R18 rating, which is what also its 40th anniversary. And to put it in perspective, you think of 18 being the X rating, R18 is essentially double X and beyond. And of course, funnily enough, those are the films that had the most cuts on video and everything. But to be honest, don't really give two shits about that because it's just porn, and all the porn we want is at our fingertips on the bloody on the internet. I mean, you watch them, you just get a. It's already good saying, "Oh well, we don't think you should watch that." It's like, dude, I watched an 18-year-old Russian girl take 2 cocks in her asshole before I even got out of bed in the morning. I mean, what the fuck do you think you're hiding from me?
Well, I will say this from my experience because I was almost going to do a podcast on pornography, but we kind of decided against it because my employers or something like that might take a listen. They might not hire me for certain positions, but I'll just say it anyways. I don't give a shit. I first actually saw my first R18 certificate materials when I was in Soho Square just a few weeks ago. And it was a little bit bizarre to actually see one on face value. It was at the Harmony Sex Shop that wasn't too far away from the BBFC and like a Curzon chain. And I'll just tell you for starters, the DVD covers in of itself are very explicit, full blown shots, unsimulated. Some of them were a little bit tongue in cheek and stuff, and I thought, my experience with R18 material is kind of non-existent because most of the sexual stuff that I do tend to watch usually tends to be at least at 15. If you consider stuff like Ghost Whisperer or Najka Blitz Tactics or XL Saga or Madlax as porn, then or a Sanex commercial or Nivea, be my guest. I generally don't watch hardcore stuff because it's not very interesting. The most pornographic film I ever saw was 9 Songs. That was the first film I ever saw that had full-blown, unsimulated fucking. But that was 18 because it was not porn, even though it probably was. It was presented as like a music, romantic drama sort of thing. It's a bit of a grey area with films that have
I've
unsimulated stuff. Like Nymphomaniac or In the Realm of the Senses or Love, 3D. Those are movies that I would think are porn, but they somehow managed to escape the R18 by presenting itself as art or as a proper drama.
Well, that's kind of what they. That there has always been the difference of what they in terms of sexual content at 18. I mean, I was talking about that French movie Baiser Moi a few years back and how it was cut for quite some bit, but of course in 2013 they finally released it completely uncut. But that's got full on unsimulated sex and everything. So make of that we will. Probably got a little off topic and everything. Should probably get on back onto the actual cinematic film ratings.
Well, it is, the 40th anniversary, like you said, of that rating as well. I just wanted to add my little thoughts on that, in case the other podcasts cannot work. But yeah, let's get back on the topic.
Worth pointing out, you say it's 40th anniversary. It means, of course, neither of us were even born when it changed. So none of us are even able to remember the old film ratings. We've always grown up with the PGs, 15s, and 18s. Well, I mean, for hell, for the most part, even 12s. And I was 4 when the 12 rating came about. So, I mean, yeah, this is about all we've known.
Exactly there. And I know for 2 out of the 3 of us, we were there when 12 became 12A. I don't know for Tom if he remembers exactly when 12 was still age restricted, but
I don't think he was born when it was changed over.
No,
it was a year after I was born. No, sorry, no, it's the year before I was born. Sorry, just brain fuzzy.
It happens to the best of us.
Well,
but,
it was a scary experience indeed if you were growing up seeing your animated works like Simpsons and Beavis and Butthead Do America get 12 certificates because that meant you couldn't really see it or you had to ask mommy and daddy to buy it for you because you didn't look old enough. And that still kind of haunts me. When I first saw Simpsons VHS tapes as 12s or something instead of PG, it kind of freaked me out because I thought, oh, okay, it's a bit more adult. I never viewed 12A as a family rating or 12.
It's not meant. Well, I mean, in some ways it is. In some ways it isn't. I don't think it was supposed to be. I mean, if you actually look back at the original ratings, I mean, I can say back in the 50s, 60s, there was just the U, A, and X, the three ratings. Obviously, A rating was kind of the family one, with U just being the what you'd probably have as a kids movie, and X just for mature audiences only. And the double A kind of meant, all right, that's more for teens, but A was always the family rating. So when it changed over, PG, that was family movies, U was kids movies, and the 15 is for mature. Of course, with 12 and now 12A being that's the go-to one for family movies, like your Avengers and your Jurassic Parks and your James Bonds and whatnot. And as I'm going to say it again, with PG being allocated to Frozen and Kung Fu Panda, Wreck-It Ralph, fucking Raya and Last Dragon. I mean,
Rise
you
of
know,
the Guardians.
yeah, stuff like that. I mean, PG essentially almost means kids movies nowadays.
No, even
you-
Paddington Bear, the two Paddington movies got a PG, and
They
that
were.
caused a bit of a fuss because they thought now it's not viewed as family friendly as it should be. Peter Rabbit, had that scene
that's
with
what
the
people being stuck in
EpiPen
the
joke.
past.
When I first saw the Peter Rabbit film got a PG, I thought, what? What next? They're going to give Pingu a 15. That's what would come.
Well, I mean, again, I mean, like I say, it was the PG but the PG has simply become a kid, the kids' movies. I think people who are complaining about Paddington being rated PG are probably a bit stuck in the past, and they still think PG means Jurassic Park or The Mask or even Raiders of the Lost Ark or Jaws. It's like, dude, it doesn't mean that anymore. 12A is the new PG. PG is practically the new U rating. I mean, we could talk about that
until the cows come
home, but that's really when it comes down to it. All it is. There's a reason why the original Jurassic Park trilogy are all PGs. The new Jurassic World trilogy are all 12As. Again, something I've talked about ad nauseum to kind of God knows how long. I mean, Mission Impossible, the first one was a PG. The second one was a 15, but that was incredibly much more violent. Again, it was almost R-rated stateside, and every one of them has since been 12A. And of course, yeah, that's just the way it goes. I mean, this idea of the old school PG we grew up with. Well, I grew up with. You may have grown up with a bit, Mark. It's not coming back. All right, it's gone. Things move forward. I guess you just kind of got to move with the times.
No, you're absolutely right. But there are some films that do slip in shit that caught me by surprise every once in a while, like Paranorman or Monster House and The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Those are films that felt to me like old school PGs. It didn't feel
2016, the 2016 Jungle Book felt a bit like that as well.
Oh, really? I haven't seen it. I don't like Disney remakes, but
what are you going to say, Tom?
I didn't feel like it wasn't like that bad. It wasn't. I'd say maybe one more recent example of like old PG possibly creeping back in would be Isle of Dogs by Wes Anderson.
Actually, I get that because it's got some gory scenes of a child pulls something out of his head and there's blood coming out and some gory images of dog deaths or injuries.
Yeah, I was
seen
slightly surprised when I saw that.
I've not seen it, so I can't comment. I mean, the one scene I was going to refer to for Jungle Book would be the scene, the moment when spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen it or wants to see it, but anyway, Shere Khan kills Akela was suddenly quite I don't know, that was quite intense. That was quite suddenly violent. I was thinking, wow, I'm surprised they could still do that in a PG nowadays on either side of the Atlantic. I thought that would be PG-13/12A, but guess I didn't think so.
Well, more power to them. I mean, it's kind of a bit of a weird situation with the Jungle Book remake. I don't like Disney remakes, so I refuse to see them anyway.
Nor do I, actually.
it does make me wonder
after
why they gave Mulan the remake a 12A, even though it's based off a U certificate movie, and Cruella, which is 12A, but basically U certificate film 101 Dalmatians. That's just bizarre.
I've not seen them. The last one I saw was The Lion King, which was me caving to peer pressure from FOMO, that meaning fear of missing out. That was got a PG rating. I hated that. I hated that fucking film. And after that, I'm not seeing any more live action Disney remakes ever because I don't want to support them.
And I thank you for doing that there. No offense, Tom, if you have seen some of them, but they're cash cows. No, just watch the originals. Nostalgia. You have to be millennial in your heart, watching them on the VHS tapes and rewinding on the bits that you were scared when you were a child, or might have made you laugh with the genie in his bottle, or might have turned you on with Jasmine in a red outfit, etc., etc. Oh wait, those are youth certificate films.
Yeah, I haven't missed much by missing out on VHS. They were kind of annoying. The only good thing about VHS was you could fast forward all the leave disclaimer crap at the beginning.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, some of the DVDs nowadays, they come out with surprising material. There's that one with the Devil Man that has a spike and has a C copyright logo on it. That freaked people out back in the 2000s. Us millennials, we remember that and we're scared.
I don't think I saw that one, to be honest.
I'll send you a link to it after this whole interview is done and said. But yeah, it's a very interesting one indeed. There. On the flip side, I know we've talked about the power of PG becoming a lot more weak over the years, to where maybe some people probably would say Roger Rabbit should be a 12 certificate, which I would slap them in the face if they said that, because no, don't do that. But then again, at the same time, 18 films were certainly much weaker back in the day than they are now.
And 15 films, more or less.
Oh yes, of course. I mean, back then you could just get a 15 and be saying fuck. Beetlejuice comes to mind, which is one of the first 15 films I ever saw. And we all know about that scene where he grabs his nuts and he says, "Nice fucking model."
It's but that is a 12 now. I mean, a lot of those films are 15s because 12 didn't exist. But of course, I mean, yeah, you are right about 18 being weaker back then. Us, so many films that were 18s are now 15s. I mean, mostly all the Alien and Predator films. I mean, we discussed on previous podcasts why they felt the need to rate Alien an X rating back in '79, because they felt the creature was too fucking sexual and everything. It's like, you're such a bunch of dicks.
Well, maybe they've got a bit of a fetish going on there that they didn't want to disclose.
Poor chest bursters, like a little innocent squeaky thing.
Well, to be honest, yeah, but even I was mentioning that, it's like, it's not bad. They say, like, just the point of that with Alien is like, it's quite a mild film. That chest burster film has probably only seen of violence in there, and it's not that strong. I mean, I mentioned on our previous podcast with Mark that Ridley Scott did Blade Runner a few years afterwards, and that's just as violent as fucking What's-It Alien. Oh, I can't talk. Leon, to be honest, that chest burster, that could potentially be very strong 12A. I don't personally think so. I say 15, but Aliens, they're fine at 15. Predator is a bit stronger because you do see severed limbs and everything, but nothing too major. That's fine at 15 as well. So yeah, then of course you got your Die Hards and your Lethal Weapons, and it's like they had to rate those 18s. Like, nah, 15s, just fine.
Well, they said the first Die Hard was like a strong 18 simply because of the blood spurts and the language. A little strange to think that's the case, really. I mean,
how far we've come.
At the same time, they were giving 18 certificates to art house films that were actually quite out there, like Man Bites Dog, which is from Belgium. I don't know if many people have heard of it really, but I think you have to see it to believe it. It's like Natural Born Killers, but there's a lot more callousness, and there's even a graphic rape involving disembowelment. It's not a pleasant film. It would still be an 18 by today's standards, but that passed through uncut because it was from Metro Tartan, which is a distributor that used to do a lot of sort of highbrow foreign language movies,
Yeah,
and
well,
then
he was
funny games as well.
well, the same. We mentioned Crash earlier as well, of course. You'd have to pause that one for one cut for it to make any sense. But I mean, that was rated NC-17 in America as well, with a cut R-rated version being practically not a movie. So yeah, I mean, he did pass that one through uncut. He didn't pass Showgirls completely uncut, but I suppose we could just commend him for passing. By him, I mean James Furman for passing Crash uncut, but all the successors would have done that as well. They just wouldn't have banned freaking Texas Chainsaw Massacre. What they wouldn't have also done was rate Watch It Down to You, and of course they have upped that to a PG, but bit late. I mean, you put it in the same category as Frozen. It should maybe Watch It Down should be a 12A. I don't know.
Well, they probably were thinking that if you bump it up too much, it will confuse people, make it seem like it's too artificial. They had the same sort of bizarre rule with Jaws, which to me has always felt like quite 15-ish. Never really a PG, not even a 12. But they didn't want to push the boat too much, and because it's a known quantity is why they only bumped it up just by one level, which I think is a little bit ridiculous considering they've done The Passenger, which was a film that was a certificate. Then they give it a PG. Then they gave it a 12. Then they gave it a 15 because of an execution. And I'm just like, what rating is this? But then again, maybe I'm a little bit confused because I've heard that the version that was submitted by BBFC was cut because they had to remove the use of the F word. I don't know. It's a Jack Nicholson film, quite obscure. It's a political thriller from like the 70s.
I've just looked it up. Yeah, I've just looked it up. Yeah, scenes of real execution on the. Yeah, I mean, like we say, we'd always like a bit of consistency. Yes, they're going to change their rules occasionally from time to time, and I suppose you kind of do have to do that to change with the times. That's why The Messenger, that Joan of Arc film done by Luc Besson starring Mila Jovovich, was a 15, is now an 18 due to apparently, I haven't seen it by the way, a protracted rape scene. But yeah, I mean, some films do change their opinions. I mean, Fast and the Furious was originally a 15, and Fellowship of the Ring were originally a PG, and now both 12s. I don't think that's what, to be fair, I think that's where they belong. I mean, the original decisions were a bit, were a bit okay, I understand with Fellowship of the Ring, but Fast and Furious, that was a dumb decision.
Well, they probably thought because of the dangerous driving and stuff that they thought, oh no, wait, Furman wasn't around at that time. They would drive too fast and try to be lousy motorists, those bloody chavs and asbos. So we have to pass it at 15. So the 12 and 14 crowd doesn't get any ideas. That's my attempt at a Robin Duvall type of voice, but it sounded a bit terrible.
Yeah.
Jerry better imitating Furman because he's a bit whispery and a bit like that. He was also partially American, just like me.
Well, that's why I know he was a bit of a. I could never tell with his accent whether or not he was actually British or American. It's always like very transatlantic going on there, to be honest. But
well, at times I can sometimes sound a little like that. Like, I mean, I can say I'm American if you want me to, but people will think I'm stupid and sound like I support George Bush, Donald Trump. All right, that's just me getting off topic there. But yeah,
I don't know what the topic. I don't know what the train of thought originally was. Now, I mean, when we're talking about 40th anniversary of the film ratings, but I suppose we've kind of. What was your first 18 again, Mark?
It was well,
you said Watchmen.
But that was at the cinema. If you're talking about TV or at the home, it was This Film Is Not Yet Rated, which was a documentary, like you guessed it, about film censorship.
Yeah.
Now, when I first saw that at 14, I had to, actually, not 14, or was it 15, 14? I can't remember. I was told to cover my eyes during the sex scenes. That was probably the big memory that I had. My father said, don't look. And I knew what was going on because they showed the uncut clips from films that were threatened with the NC-17. And I thought, okay, probably should look the other way.
Well,
I was a bit of a prude.
Really, you don't say. What about you, Todd? What did you say? What your first 18 was?
It was The Dreamers by Bertolucci.
Oh fuck, you did say yeah. I get so forgetful at times. Um,
Or did you see it
Don't
in the
worry.
cinema, or did you see it at home?
Um, I saw it as part of Film Society at uni,
Oh, all right.
which is
really?
sort
So
of
that's your
Did,
first 18 rated film you've only watched quite recently.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, like I guess I never really like back home we never really used to watch that kind of stuff, but being in the Film Society sort of allowed me to see new stuff like Isle of Dogs and House, which is one of the weirdest films I've ever seen. But make of that what you will.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean,
uh,
yeah.
just
All right.
yeah.
Pardon?
Oh, I was going to say, like, just to demonstrate how strange it is, there's a scene in it where a character's trying to pull up like a cabbage from a well, and it turns out to be someone's severed head that talks and then like spits blood out.
Jeepers, creepers.
that sounds like something from a Dario Argento Giallo type of film. Well,
It is a bit Argento-like.
you would make great friends with my American friend because he loves Hosu. I think it's called in Japanese, or House.
Yeah. That's the film I was
Because he
talking
loves
about.
that movie as well. He loves a lot of sort of J horror and surreal type of movies from Japan. Did you see it with the BBFC certificate on it? Did it have like the print and it had the circle on it? Dreamers or
No. It's
Hosu?
just no. I think it was just Criterion's logo on it. They were just using that print.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
it was an enjoyable film, but fuck me, that was just a strange one.
It's a 15 certificate in case anyone is curious out there. It is a very surreal experience. Is
I
at least what I'll
just
say.
I just looked up the Isle of Dogs and it was PG-13 rated stateside. So make of that what we will. I am actually quite surprised from what you told me. It didn't get rated 12A over here. Maybe it's because of how it was made. The BBFC were lenient. I don't know. I've
Well,
already mentioned how my first ever 18 I ever saw, to the best of my memory, was RoboCop. It would have been the R-rated version, the actual version.
Ah,
Saw
yeah.
about when I was, I think, 5 years old and everything. I'm watching it with my brother and his mates in his room, and oh god, I did not like the scene where Murphy got shot.
we're gonna give you a nightmare. Come on, Tom. Let's tease him.
I'm too tired to participate in this shit.
All right,
I
fan's
am
over.
way too tired. Let's stop teasing Rob.
I'm
It's
trying to give him a
okay.
nightmare by reenacting the scene with my vocal cords.
Well, it's
Oh,
it's
fucking
okay.
hell.
It's a, well, your vocal cords will keep you the nightmare alone, Mark. So I mean. But I've seen the film so many more times now. This time the uncut version, so I mean it's a bit of a moot point. I don't remember what the first 15 was. I was about to say Terminator 2, but I might have seen Gremlins a few years before it, and of course that was technically a 15 because it wasn't 12 at the time. So, oh, again, rambling a bit then.
No, but it coincides with everything that we're talking about. Your PGs, 15s, and 18s there, lad.
Yeah, because 12 did not exist at the time of creation. It would not exist for another 7 years or 6.5. 5 years after MPAA made PG-13, so they'd make PG-13 movies, and the BBFC would just slap a 15 of them. Although some did get rated PG without cuts.
Well, actually,
That's quite boss of them.
brings me to two conversations here because when PG-13 came out, most of them were 15 certificates, like Red Dawn, the first ever movie to receive that rating, and Flamingo Kid and Dreamscape. And then as well, because I know you're a fan of Rick Mile from Bottom, Drop Dead
Oh,
Fred,
definitely. Oh, that's true. Yeah, that
who
was
I
a 12.
actually
But
interviewed the filmmaker. I always assumed that was a 15 certificate growing up, and I always wanted to see it because I have a crush on Phoebe Cates because she has a bobbed haircut. She looks gorgeous, but I couldn't see it because it was a 15. And then when I saw it when it was a 12 on DVD, I was like
It was a
13 and
12
it
out.
was too late. I was just like,
It was
oh.
actually a 12 out of cinema, but again, because of they hadn't put 12 on videos for like 5 years, it had to be bumped up to 15. And Jesus Christ! But yeah, I mean, it is a. Sorry, what was it going? Where was it going with that again? Yeah, but it was a 12 out of cinema. It was only put a 15 on the video due to they didn't have a 12 to put on video. It took him a bit while to drop it to a 12, but it's a 12 film. It's about as 12 as it gets.
It felt kind of PG to me, even though he says rude remarks about the bitch is right there. Look at the bitch.
It's probably the bad behavior, really, like all the putting dog shit on a freshly shampooed carpet. That's what my brother reckoned, anyway.
Yeah, you're probably right. There's probably the crude humor, more or less, even though it is a fairly juvenile movie. Upon thinking about it, I always thought he was kind of doing a whole Johnny Rotten from Sex Pistols sort of thing. You know, he's all wild head.
By the way, we've got about 5.5 minutes left.
Sorry. No, should be reeling it back in there. But
That's all
yes,
right.
I know. And well, did I say about my experiences with PG films? A bit dangerous back in the day. And then
what was your first one?
It was Toy Story. But upon
you
thinking,
did say, didn't you? Yeah, I got a terrible memory.
Oh no worries there. But upon thinking about it, really, because I have my nostalgia phases every once in a while. I was with you at HMV and CEX in Cardiff. And we were looking at all these titles, and we were just thinking to ourselves, "Wow, the times have changed, really." Sometimes revisit films from my past, like The Mask, Edward Scissorhands, Small Soldiers, and Men in Black. A lot of those films, they were like a PG-13 stateside, and I think, oh, I wish I could go back to those days with the PG being quite rough on the edges there.
Yeah, it was only because it had to be, though. When that's the first thing they did when 12 became 12A. It was like, just okay, we're clamping down on PG, and that was obvious when you look at the Lord of the Rings trilogy. First one was rated PG, as I mentioned earlier. Next two, no, automatic 12As. I mean, that was so obvious from the get go, because it was just weird how they put the first films in both Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings are in the same category as each other. I was like, yeah, a bit of a difference in the kind of film though, but that's well, that's what it was. I mean, is there anything else we could cover, or do you reckon this discussion has run its course?
I think it might have run its course as far as I'm concerned, but I'm sure probably Tom has a few things in regards to the nostalgic elements about PG and 15 because
Yeah,
okay,
probably said what I wanted to say.
Oh, all right, if you say so there. I will say on the last minute thing before we close this off, I will apologize to anyone about my comments about the R18 certificate. I hope no one thinks I'm a pervert or some sort
I don't think
of
anyone's
weirdo
going
or
to think that
freak.
dude. I don't think anyone's going to think that dude.
I mean, everyone has their own little preferences, but R18 prior to the New Labour changes in 1999 and Furman leaving, it was only for softcore titles. And for such a long time, it was mostly just, humping and that sort of thing. Sometimes you even get it from like Caligula slipping in with an R18. And up after 99 and around 2000, that's when they started allowing all the hardcore shit to pass through. That's just a little tidbit I want to remind everyone on. And about the 12 certificate coming to VHS, that would eventually be coming back in 1994.
Correct.
So for those who kind of lost on the good days, like the early millennials like Rob, I feel sorry for you. But as far as what we have is concerned, that's all I have to say for today. I'm sure the same that's the case for Rob and Tom. We hopefully will be back again with a Christmas podcast. We'll be talking about like Bad Santa and Gremlins and Die Hard and Grinch, maybe even Violent Night. I hope that gets an 18, but it probably won't.
Well, we'll see. I think it'll probably be a 15, but time will tell.
Oh yes, and Rare Exports, a Finnish movie that was given a 15 because of nudity and threat and Krampus. But I thank you so much for coming on board, having this talk with us. Hopefully, there isn't too many technical glitches, or no one thinks I'm a pervert or dangerous freak.
I don't think anyone thinks that. Oh well, yeah, it was a nice, good fun. Nice to speak to you both again, Mark and Tom, and I guess have a good evening.